All right, we're live, back again. The next episode, like Snoop Dogg and I guess Dr. Dre. Oh, hey, bad news about Dr. Dre. Did you hear that, Jeremy?
I
He
did,
had a
man. I did.
brain
But
rant.
when you hear brain aneurysm, you think the worst, right?
Hmm.
It was crazy that like an hour or two after he was telling people that he was recovering and just fine. So,
Okay,
but the fact that someone robbed his house while he was in the hospital was even more crazy,
man, that's social media right there. You
dude.
can't.
Or his ex-wife.
Yeah, man, it's terrible, man. Like someone like Dr. Dre, someone like you and me, growing up. Like he's like an
Dude.
icon, man. Like he was a big part of the music scene in
Oh
the
yeah.
90s. So, you cannot forget about him. But, like even I don't really follow music nowadays, but Dr. Dre pops up on social media. It's like, what happened to him? You know what I mean? Like he's just someone that you'll never forget. But anyways, we're back. And this week I have the boss. He paid the cost to be the boss, stick with the hip hop and all that rap. Jeremy Brand. Thank you, Jeremy. MMAsucka.com. He's the president, he's the owner. He's, like I said, he's the boss man. He runs the show. Really appreciate you coming on, man. I know you don't really do the video stuff too often, but it's good to see your face, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. And I mean, it's been a long time coming. And I said to you beforehand, 2021 could bring the return of some podcasts over at MMA Sucka, maybe some video stuff. Hopefully I'll get the video here a little better, a little crisper, better lighting and stuff. I got a camera to toy around with. This is just the MacBook camera, but I appreciate you having me on to shoot the, I don't know if I can swear, but just shoot the crap.
Yeah,
And I before we even get into things, I just want to thank you not only for having me on, but like pushing people to MMAsucka.com. Like your boy Kenny Lee, you suggested him coming over to write for us, and he's been a huge asset since he's come aboard, man. Like this guy's wanting to write, he's eager to write, he's wanting to learn like SEO stuff, behind the scenes stuff with the site. He's really wanting to learn and grasp. Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate like the love that you have for MMAsucka.com.
No doubt, man. Of course, man. You guys have been around for a long time. You guys survived
Yeah,
for
bro.
so long, you know what I mean? Like I've seen so many sites come and go. I've worked for so many sites that have come and gone, you know what I mean? Like they don't even exist anymore. And the crazy part about that is like I have stuff that I wrote from years back, but because of the site not existing anymore, all of that is just gone. Like
Yeah.
I can't even show people that I actually did some kind of writing or some kind of coverage for certain shows or certain events. Or what do you think of that, man? Like what should journalists do or just people in the media do because of that?
It's tough, dude, because you never know the longevity of a site. You never know what could happen. I mean, we've seen, I started this game in the MMA Sucka. I started it in 2009. I still remember the date. I still remember everything. November 29th, 2009 was the date that the site was born. And I seen plenty of sites come and go, and some big ones with some big hitters on the site. Like that's the thing, is people try to always run to the next big ship. Whereas I find the guys that have helped us the most have been the guys that have ridden with us, taken the waves, maybe hit some big deep dives, and then continued to ride the ship with us. Now, I mean, they're not getting paid the USA Today or the MMA Fighting or any of that kind of stuff because we're an independent website. But if you want to use something as a platform, if you want to use something as owning your craft, you don't care about making giant dollars or anything like that, or use freelance, you know what I mean? Like jump aboard a few different sites, but you can't always rely on the site always being there is the problem. Like you're saying, you might write for someone, that site might be gone tomorrow, and your work out the door.
Yeah, that's right, man. And one thing that I could give you props on is that you're very transparent. That's one thing that I
100%,
noticed.
man. You have
Yeah.
to be. You can't say, dude, you're going to make $1,000 this month and the guy gets paid 50. You know what I mean? Like we're simple. We ask our guys to write once a week. If you write once a week, you qualify for a bit of pay. Whatever that is whatever the site makes overall. We do a percentage. We used to, hell, 4 years ago, I partnered up with a site called Last Word on Sports. Since then, we've turned into a site where we really want things more professional, but still transparent. We've got roles on the site now. We got managing editors, we've got editors, we've got staff writers, and we've got writers. It all breaks down into percentage. Whatever the site makes as a whole, these guys break up amongst themselves. The more they want to write, they can get promotions. It's like an office job, man. These guys aren't there just to shoot the shit. They're there to write. And if they want to write more, they get promotions up to being a staff writer. If they want to do more and they feel like they're owning their craft and they're becoming, their SEO and all that stuff is good, they can become editors and then work their way up to managing editors and whatnot. We got bonuses throughout the month. If they hit certain quotas or they're showing us some wicked skills, we'll hit them with that too. Like, we're not trying to take away from them. I'm not trying to make big bucks. I still have a full-time job. I never wanted to make this my full-time job. This was a hobby for me. I enjoy seeing guys come to the site and enjoy seeing them do what they love, because I love giving back to them and watching them grow as writers. Like, we've had some big boys on our site that have moved on to some big sites, man. And that's the coolest thing ever. I obviously hate it deep down inside, but like, Mike Bond from MMA Junkie wrote for us at one time. The guy still suggests new writers, if they're looking for a new site, to come over to MMAsucka.com. James Lynch, always pushing guys over to MMAsucka.com. Like, I got love for these guys because just they got love for us, man.
Yeah, man, it's clear. It's like, even myself, man. Like you mentioned earlier, I will push people to MMA Sucka because I know. And if someone comes to me and tells me like, "Hey, man, they're asking me for advice on like what to do in the media world or whatever," and I'm the last person you should probably ask. But if you're gonna ask me, what I mean, I'm gonna kind of gauge you first. What I mean, I'm gonna kind of look at you and see what type of person you are. I'm not going to throw random people at you and be like, "Oh, go over here and go over here," because I want to know who you are. Because if I'm gonna recommend you to another person, it's like setting somebody up on a date.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, is that what it is? I hate doing that. I don't.
And you know what? We're at a point now, which is nice, where I don't have to take everyone aboard. We got 25 plus writers on the site. Some of them write once a week. Some of them write multiple times a week, whatnot. Some of them slack a little bit too, but stuff gets in people's lives and I can't complain about that stuff. But we're at a point where if someone can't write worth shit, we don't have to take them aboard. Like, we have editors for stuff, but I want to see your unedited work. I want to see what you can give to us in order to get through the game. And we don't need, as we talked about before, I don't know if you want to ask it in a question or not, but we don't need guys to just come aboard and be like, "Yeah, I want to do UFC previews. I want to talk about UFC breakdowns. I want to talk about GSP. I want to talk about Conor McGregor." Dude, that stuff will be great. It'll get hits. But every other MMA website out there has that stuff. You need to find your niche. And you've done that, John, with this, video stuff. You, James Lynch, you guys have really created that sort of video interview stuff. And I applaud you for that. Coming aboard a website, very similar. You need to find a niche. It might not be video because guys are already doing that. But if you can be that guy on the regional scene, regional prospects, find guys in your own town. And the coolest thing about finding guys in your own town is when they get to the UFC, they remember you.
That's right. Loyalty, there's something to that, man. With fighters,
big time.
With fighters
coaches, and managers, coaches, everything.
Yes, it is, man. Like, I look at like the Australian scene. You know what I mean? Like Australia and New Zealand. 5 years ago, think about it. 5 years ago, who was covering Australia and New Zealand? Think about it. Not really
many people. I actually had a guy for the site named Justin Fox who covered MMA in Australia, and he got signed by a big promotion out there. It was like a newspaper or something, and I think he might have been one of the only guys. He got on blacklist for like Beck Hyatt and stuff back then. Beck Rawlings now. She blocked all of us.
But yeah, like even like those, that's an example of you or somebody out there that wants to get into this game and don't think about the UFC. Of course, you're gonna watch it and want
cover
to
it still. Every site has to cover it.
Yeah,
right?
But
because they are the big players.
Yeah, but you gotta find that niche. You know what I mean? Like even myself, like I'm in Korea, right? And in Asian countries are just all scattered everywhere. But then I looked at it and said, all right, let me check Australia. You know what I mean? Because I have a connection through like some people in Thailand. Let me see like the promotions out there. And I noticed that nobody was like interviewing the fighters out there. And I was like, this is a melting pot. This is a new scene that's going to bubble in the next couple of years. And nobody is covering or even chatting with any of the fighters there. So I was just like, all right, let me get into it. And I just started like researching all the promotions and just reaching out to the promotions, reaching out to the fighters and just interviewing them over and over. If you go to my page, there's hundreds of interviews that I've done with the fighters in Australia and New Zealand. And guess what? Now I get to talk with Dan Hooker.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I get to speak with Alex Volkanovski because I think the reason behind that is because I put in that legwork and covering them back in the day. And now it's like they show that loyalty. I don't know if it's loyalty, but they show that respect.
I think it's because they know you've been with them from like almost the get-go. I got a lot of guys out here in BC and Vancouver. The first organization I covered isn't even around anymore, but I've been with Battlefield Fight League, which is a local promotion here where they've garnered a ton of champions in their organization that they've pushed on to the UFC. Cole Smith, Arjun Bular, who moved on to one championship. A lot of these guys I saw from their very first amateur fight. I've been with them for the long haul. And I've always told myself over at MMASucka.com, the BC, British Columbia fight scene will always have a home because of that. So like if you want to write for the site and you live in, say, like Virginia or Ohio or something, some small town, and you have a local promotion there and you want to cover it, fight in, fight out, fight in, fight out, throw it on our site. That's the kind of thing I want because the regional scene doesn't get enough coverage. Some of these websites for the regional scene, you can't even find results for their previous events. SureDog, Tapology, they might not even have the results. So if you want to cover that for a site, we're always willing to bring it aboard. The one thing I say is I don't want a one-off. So I don't want you to go to an event, cover it once, and then that site or that organization completely falls off the website. Keep it for the long haul, man. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's consistency too. If you're gonna start, and I think everybody struggles with that in the beginning. When you start, you start, and then you I guess you rush in with your head through the door. You know what I mean? Like that's how you feel. Like, I'm gonna do it.
Exactly. And that's the thing is you come in and your guns are blazing. So you write like 3-4 articles a week, and then I'm like, dude, where you been the last 3 weeks?
But I think everybody struggles with that. But nowadays there's so many guys you could go to and ask them questions and they'll give you the advice that you need. Like, hey, don't do this.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I like about the MMA scene is, yes, there's competition, but it's not the same competition as like any other press out there, like other media. NHL, those guys are all fighting amongst each other. Even coming to terms with interviewing guys, like interviewing NHL players, interviewing NBA players. The MMA world is still so small that you could reach out to 99% of these guys and get interviews.
Yeah, I'm living proof of that, man.
Exactly.
Like, I just reached out to them, man, and they're just like, hey, you want to talk to me? It's almost like back, when they're just coming up, they're like, oh, you really want to talk to me? It's like, yeah, man, of course. Of course I want to talk to you, man. People want to know your story because what is your goals eventually? It's not like your goal is to just be this guy on the regional scene and fighting. And if it is, whatever, but you still want to promote yourself, and there's got to be something that you want to accomplish in this sport. If you're fighting, you know what I mean? Fighting is not like playing another sport. It's not a game, you know what I mean? Like you could get hurt.
Exactly.
The risks. So there must be a goal, right? There must.
And my favorite thing when I interview fighters, and a lot of guys get stuck in the rut of asking them the same old standard questions. How's your fight camp going? Who's going to be in your corner? What's your prediction for the next fight? You hear that everywhere. I don't care about that kind of thing. My favorite thing to talk about fighters with is stuff outside the cage. What do you eat for dinner? What kind of video games do you like to play? What's your favorite kind of girl? You know what I mean? Like get to know the person. You don't need to get to know the fighter. Do you know what I'm saying? Like obviously for an interview or an article to write about, you need to talk about the fight that's coming up or the fight that happened. but there's got to be some sort of thing that you can pull out of them that no one else has heard.
Mhm.
And two guys that I love in the MMA media scene, Dwayne Finley and Hunter Homestead. Those two guys came out with a new show, and they're like the epitome of getting wicked stories out of guys. So if you're looking at getting into the game, then I highly suggest listening to their interviews, because they went on road trips and all that kind of stuff. Man, like those are the kind of interviews that I want to hear. You can hear the what's your fight camp been like everywhere.
Yeah, of course, man. Like that's another thing that I wanted to get into is like finding your place, finding your niche, like what you want to do, what you want to cover. And even with like video interviews or just video content or audio content podcasts, there's always something you can do that's different from someone else. And maybe if it's similar to someone else too, like you said, like even like some of my questions will be referring to their training camps, you know,
you
like,
have to though. You have to.
you know, like I'll ask those questions, but there's guys out there, you know, for example, Aaron Bronstetter, he doesn't really talk about that when he interviews fighters because he's in a place where he could delve into different aspects of the fighter, right? But for me, like I have to kind of fill that void, fill that niche, right? Of training camps. Who did you train with? You know, like what do you implement in different, you know, like those things. But I also ask other stuff too, you know what I mean, while we're going through it, because I don't want to just ask the same thing and not delve into other things that they kind of like release, and you kind of pinpoint that during the interview, and you got to pull that out of them.
You have to listen.
Yeah.
You have to listen, because there could be some little tidbit that you miss from what they're saying. And one thing I also do as well, and I started this like 8-9 years ago when I first started MMA Sucka Radio, and I used to write out questions, and I used to come up with topics for all the guys I interview. I literally now just have their Tapology page open. I have 0 questions written down because I don't want to sound like a robot, and I want it to be just like you and I right now. There's no questions right now, really. We're conversing. We're shooting the shit. That's what I want an interview to sound like. I don't want to sound like a computer that, you know, like I don't want to be Siri. I can ask her all the questions in the world.
Yeah, I used to be like that completely.
Everyone did.
You know, in the day, I used to be prepared to the nines and just and I sounded like a robot. And even in the interviews, you could kind of see my eyes kind of like going back to the place where I had everything written down, you know, like, and I would go watch that. I'd be like, okay, I got to improve up on that. I can't continue doing that because I'm like OCD in some ways with like being clean and preparing and stuff like that. So I kind of have was, you know, able to look at myself and say, okay, I got to fix that. I can't do that because it doesn't look natural.
So there's a difference between being clean and prepared and reading off a screen. So if I'm interviewing someone that I know the day before or a week before or whatever, I'll read articles about them and whatnot, store that stuff in my head, and then just shoot the shit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, this is good because I think a lot of people that would listen to this or listening to it now, and if you have any questions for Jeremy or any topics that you want us to get into, we'll get into anything that you guys want. Just put them in the chat and we'll put them up. Yeah, just levels, you know, there's levels also, you know, like the fighters say, there's levels to this game, you know what I mean? Like he's not on my level, right? In MMA media. And what do you think of the levels? You know what I mean? Like, is there levels to MMA media? Is there a different like avenue?
I mean, there is and there isn't. Like, obviously, the pinnacle is the USA Today or the MMA Fighting or the ESPN. But I mean, everything underneath there is sort of wishy-washy. There's plenty of great sites out there that you can get yourself started with. Like Eric Cowell, my buddy at My MMA News, that guy has a great site and plenty of fantastic writers over there. Obviously, our site. There's so many different avenues to go in, and there's levels in terms of moving from us, independent websites, to the big boys. But everything there in between is sort of like, you know, the same swimming pool.
It is.
But at the same time, I guess there are guys who will pay out of their own pockets and whatnot to keep writers aboard. But that, I'll tell you, those are typically the guys that I've seen over the course of the last 11, 12 years go under, right? They're like, man, I'm putting so much work into this, and I'm paying out of my own pocket and I'm not getting the return that I was expecting. And those are the guys that go out there and they sign the big boys. They sign the guys that worked for those big sites to make this all-star site, and the all-star sites just never work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
you know what I mean? We saw it with Flow Combat. We saw it with Heavy. Heavy had a wicked MMA site back in the day with all the heavy hitters, and both those sites completely gone because they tried to get all the all-stars. Megan Oliveira, now she's on UFC broadcast. She started at Heavy.
Well, wasn't there like champions also?
Champions.co. Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
There's been a bunch of with all-stars, and those guys proved that they were all-stars because they moved to the other big websites.
All right. Well, Nick is joining us late. Everybody knows Nick. You know what I mean?
Sorry, guys.
He's the producer. The producer.
I just had to interview Lillian Garcia, the ring announcer for PFL. She used to obviously be WWE ring announcer, so I couldn't move the time. Been trying to get her pinned down for a week, so apologies, guys. Please continue. I'll be quiet in the back.
Oh yeah, and what is it? I think also with the levels and when I started with just play by play. Like I would go to shows, local shows, regional shows, and I would do play by play. And then I started dabbling in like previews for the UFC, right? But the show was in Asia. Like it wasn't like a show in like, you know, like in Europe or something. Like it was a UFC show in Asia, like mostly covering the Asian fighters, and I would do those previews and I would practice with that and then do news articles, you know, like beat writing and just continue. And then eventually I evolved into doing video and I think, you know, everybody needs to kind of go through that evolution. You know, if you're going to do anything, you got to go through the evolution of trying everything in the beginning, little bit, you know, and then finding out, okay, what are you good at? Because if you think like, oh, I'm just going to do video and you're shit at video, like you don't know how to edit, you don't know how to speak, you're not flowing smoothly.
You're just using your phone.
Yeah, you're uncomfortable, you know, like there's, you know, you gotta kind of try to find, you know, different things, dibble and dabble, you know what I mean? That's what you need to do in the start. And then you'll eventually find something for yourself. Because if you look at it, there's guys like Steve Morocco, you know what I mean? What is it? Sean Al-Shadi or whatever, you know, like those guys don't really do interviews or videos, right? They're doing like long form, they're writing, right? Most of the time.
He used to take all of the MMA Junkie radio articles and transcribe them and put them into articles. But that stuff sort of went away a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And there's guys like you know, I think one of the best in the business is Damon Martin. That guy
100%. He taught me so much early in MMA Sucka days. He would give me PR context. He'd give me fighter information. He sort of molded the way I write my fight announcements. That guy is such a beauty. And again, so level-headed that he doesn't care the information that he gives you because he doesn't see people as competition. Mm-hmm. He sees people as equals, and you're in the same game that I am. We're all on the same team covering media. Maybe you can get a cool tidbit and I'll use it. You know what I mean? Like every website out there uses stuff and sources from other people. Now, obviously some people don't source the article properly, but it happens. Like we all use other people's stuff. Like you guys have interviews on here, and I'm sure some people take some quotes from these interviews and use them on their website. Now, if they source it properly, all the best, but sometimes they don't. If they don't, whatever, it's not the end of the world, you know, but that's those guys, Damon Martin, all these guys, man, they've all like sort of molded me. Eric Fontanez, who's a guy who hasn't been in the game for a little bit. I think he's getting back into it. He helped me out a lot when I was younger in my game as well. But man, I don't see it as a competition. I see it as a long game. And guys have written for my site as well as other sites at the exact same time. We got guys on our site who are writing for like 6 sites at the same time right now. I mean, look at James Lynch. He's the biggest hustler in the game. And grinding.
Yeah, man. He's definitely the biggest hustler in the game.
But guys can't try to be like him. That's
exactly.
Don't try to be James Lynch. James Lynch is James Lynch.
And people, I think they forget, like they probably think James Lynch has hasn't been in the game for a while. Dude, he's been in the game for a long time.
He started with Fight Network. That's not even really a thing anymore.
No. But yeah, he's just, he knows everything now, you know what I mean? Like he's still improving, and he's still looking for ways to improve, and
every time, all the time.
Yeah, and he's a guy that you know, he's a perfect example of someone that survived MMA media, but in a different way. You know what I mean? Because he could have always like said, "Oh man, this is not working out. I'm gonna go and do something else and work in another sport or something like that." But he just continued. And the thing about him is, I have no contact with Damian Martin, so I have no idea. I just know who he is and what he does, so I respect that. James, I know him a little bit more on a personal level, and those two guys are probably two of the best in the business. You know what I mean? Of course, there's the big names out there, but those guys I respect probably the most out of anybody. Just watching them.
I like following the smaller fish in the pond. You know what I mean? Like there's the big names. We can all look to Ariel Helwani, but 99% of us are never going to be Ariel Helwani. He lucked out, as did a lot of these big players in the game. They got in at the right time. They met the right people. And that's how you grow in this sport is when you meet the right people. Now, coming aboard a website that has been around for as long as we have, you can start to meet the right people, man. We'll put you in contact with press. We'll put you in contact with these people, and you know, we're always helping people grow.
You never know who you're gonna work with, and you never know who you're gonna run into. It's just like, you know, with fighters too. You know, who knew that in Ireland there was a guy named Conor McGregor, you know, like who was gonna become the biggest star the UFC has ever had. Who knew that? Nobody.
Nobody.
You know? Nobody knew that. Nobody expected that. They expected maybe someone in the US to become that person, you know what I mean? Because the UFC is based in the US, and you know, they would like to market an American, but it's not that way. Now with what is the other thing? Yeah, surviving, man. That's the thing that the last part of the MMA media I wanted to get into, and then we'll get into some questions. Is surviving. What do you think are the keys to survive in MMA media, man? Especially like, you know, like I guess in covering the sport, but on top of like being like I guess a reputation too, right? Reputation goes a long way.
It does. You have to put off what you want to receive. You know what I mean? If you're an asshole, people are going to be an asshole to you. I think the longevity in the sport is all about patience. Don't think you're going to be huge right off the hop. You're coming from journalism school doesn't mean you're going to come in and start making the big bucks. You know, you might be able to write for a newspaper. I don't know what they pay, but you might not be able to get into MMA. You might be writing about, you know, your local university swimming team or something like that. But if you want to get into MMA, then you need to start at a site that has been around, or even one that hasn't been around that long. Like, be the name at that site. Like, you could find a site that has 2 or 3 writers on it and be the big name on that site and craft some fantastic articles. I think patience is very key. Coming in knowing that you're not going to make huge bank as well, because a lot of guys come in thinking they're going to make the Ariel Helwani money, the Joe Rogan money. You're not going to. Like, just be honest with yourself. You're going to have to hustle side jobs. You're going to have to, you know, work a 9 to 5 maybe, or work something else along the lines and diving through this stuff. But just be patient.
Yeah, patience.
And consistent. Don't write 1 week and then wait like 6 months and write something else. As I said, we ask guys to write once a week. We ask if you can put in more, fantastic. Because the more you put yourself out there, the more you're going to be seen. We're going to push you as much as you push yourself. But we always tell people for promoting their articles, like, if you write an article about Conor McGregor, why is someone going to come to MMA Sucka and read the article about Conor McGregor when they could go to MMA Junkie or MMA Fighting or ESPN about Conor McGregor? You got to put something into it. If you take an hour to write your article, you got to push your article for another 3 hours. Promote yourself. That's the key.
Yeah. When you talked about it right there, is patience and consistency. The patience part, like I've had many times, you know, over the years, like where I'm like, man, this is going nowhere.
Yep.
You know, I'm like, this is going nowhere. I'm gonna quit. Like, I'm gonna quit. But then at the same time, like, I'm not a quitter, but I'm gonna quit because maybe I should just do something else, right? Because there's been many, many times where it's just like I'm kind of treading water. You know, I feel like it. I feel like I'm treading water. To other people, it might not look like that, but for myself, I feel that way. And I'm just like, okay, if this year it doesn't happen, then I'm not gonna do it the next year. But then the next year comes and I'm just thinking like, I can't stop now.
No, and you have to have a love for yourself doing what you're doing. You have to love what you're doing, because if you don't love it, it's not going to happen. You're not going to do it. You're not going to continuously put in the grind and continuously put in the effort to do what you're doing. With you, it's these videos, it's the interviews, it's whatnot. With me, it's the behind the scenes at the website. I don't have to write as much as I used to. I used to write 3, 4, 5 articles a day, every day of the week. My wife hated it. But we're at a point where I don't need to put in much work at all. We have a ton of writers. We put in the effort. There were times when I definitely wanted to walk away from the sport. When the UFC had events on every weekend, 3 times a week, sometimes I was like, I don't care to watch this stuff anymore. I'm over it. But we had writers, we had other guys that were able to cover the aspect of it. And my favorite thing to do now is just see the guys that I've brought aboard grow and see their writing go from, you know, good, because we don't bring aboard, as I said, half-assed writers anymore, go from good to better to great to not needing much editing at all. That's what you want to see from your writers, is these guys that can write themselves. And if they want to put in a resume or something to another site, that site doesn't see articles that was heavily edited by our editors.
You've created somewhat of like a university over there.
I try.
That website, you know, and that's great, man. And knowing, I guess, knowing your place too at the certain time or moment of your come up is great too. It's like, don't get overblown, don't get too big headed. Just because you got this interview and maybe you got like 10,000 views or something like that, and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna get hired by ESPN next week. They probably saw my interview. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff disappeared.
I say that same thing to people. I say, you could have one article that got 20,000 views, but your next article might get 100. You can't be a one-trick pony. Do you know what I mean? You have to consistently write and make it happen. It's all, dude, yeah, I don't know. It's funny to see these guys that want to come in and think that they're the next big thing. There's no such thing.
Yeah, there isn't. And you know, like, before we get into the questions, one last thing that I wanted to input is that for years and years I used to listen to a lot of the podcasts for comedians, and then when you listen to their stories, man, like, you think like they were just in the game for like a couple of years and now they have podcasts and they're big names and they're getting sponsors and all of this stuff, but those guys been in the game for like 20 years. Like, you know, like all the guys that Joe Rogan kind of put on.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like they just put them on. Those guys were in the grind, man.
No, and they sat outside the Comedy Store in LA, like sitting outside, waiting until 2, 3 in the morning to get on the mic for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it's like, are you willing to do that, right? Exactly. Are you willing to put that legwork in? Are you willing to face that embarrassment? Are you willing, like comedians?
That's something else, embarrassment. And it's not necessarily embarrassment because your article sucked, but you got to be able to deal with guys saying you suck.
Yeah.
Because if your article, if someone puts it up on Reddit, those guys, it's a junkyard over there, man. They're going to hate the shit out of most of your articles. And if they like it, it might be one guy out of 100,000. I've had so many times when people say, MMA Sucka sucks, man. That website sucks. Whatever. At the end of the day, the website is still there. I've seen plenty disappear. We still have people writing for it. People enjoy the community we have. You can ask Kenny Lee, who's in the chat there. We got a great Facebook chat that we have. Actually, John, you were in the Facebook chat. You know, it's crazy, man.
Yeah. You guys have a good camaraderie, and that's important too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Helping each other out. Now, let's get to the questions. Nick, what we got so far?
All right. Yeah. Again, I apologize for being late, guys. I hope you guys had a good chat. I'm sure you did. As you said, Kenny Lee is in the chat. We can start with his question. Why not? Let's bring it up. Kenny says, if you decide to write for different outlets, how do you manage what to write for different outlets? Because I assume it would be pointless to write the same type of stuff on different outlets. I hope that made sense. I think he added there. So yeah. Did you get all of that?
Yeah, I did. I got it for sure. John, you want to answer this or you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. You're the guest, man. You go ahead.
All right, cool. Well, writing different stuff for different outlets. Yeah, it can be tough, but again, you got to find your niche. If your niche is talking about regional guys, and I know Kenny, you dabbled in that results post for us a month or two ago, where you went to the show. I forget what the show was even.
Yeah,
but
I was with Kenny.
There you go. You guys were at that together. You dove into that. Now, if you can get interviews from those guys, those interviews don't all have to go up on MMAsucka.com. You could put a few over at another site. You could put a few over at our site. Dabble with that. Interviews can go up various places. Now, when it comes to news and stuff, you're going to figure out what is the niche at this website and what's their focus. Our focus, we like to just cover everything. We're like, as you said, we're a bit of a university. We don't ever deny people what they want to write about. It may be stupid to me. It's not stupid to the person who's writing it. So out there in the world, billions of people, someone will latch onto that article the same way you did. Find the niche for the site that you're going to write for and do it for that site. If the other site is all about interviews, if the other site is all about breaking news, if the other site is all about, breakdowns or whatnot, do that for the other site. There's no wrong way to write for each individual site. You just can't write the exact same thing for each site because that kills our SEO.
Yeah, and I'm a type of person that I like to find like one website, and I had moments where like maybe I should work for multiple websites, and that'd be better for myself. But then I'm like, my personality is like, I want to find one place where I could put myself in there and just pour my heart into like helping that entity.
I like that. I like that because that's what I said to you earlier is the guys that have seen the most growth within the website, moved up the rankings, our staff rankings and whatnot, are the guys that have stuck with us. There's plenty of guys that have come to the site and moved on to other sites and pulled guys with them, which is an asshole move completely. Like, don't poach from other websites. But guys that will stick with you from the long haul, it might not look pretty now, but that stuff is going to rise eventually. And I mean, we saw it last month, and I don't usually put numbers out there or anything, but last month, December 2020 was one of our biggest months. We got like 120,000 views on the website in that month alone, which is massive for an independent website.
Yeah, man. Congratulations. You guys, it's that legwork, man. It's that hustle. It's that,
and it's niche articles, because what we've found is the articles that are doing the best that month were our results articles, actually, and results articles that not a lot of websites put up, like the Submission Undergrounds. The grappling articles do huge for us. KSW does massive for us. All these little promotion, well, not little, but they're not the UFCs or the Bellators and stuff like that. The littler promotions, KSW, even the regional scene, those articles always do well. So if you can find that niche for us and help it grow, all that money goes back to you guys.
I could see like a KSW or a Submission Underground getting more numbers than a Bellator.
100%. KSW gets us 8,000 views sometimes, man.
Yeah,
for one article.
That's huge. That's huge. Like KSW, people have started to catch on, to the type of talent that they have and what type of shows they put on. So they're interested. And also with that too is you're more likely to have people share the articles. And that spreads it on social media, Facebook,
That's
Twitter.
Exactly it. You're not going to you write an article about Conor McGregor, you're not going to get him to share the article. We wrote an article last week about this Euros guy. I forget what his last name is, but he just signed a debut with an organization, and he shared the article numerous times on all of his social media, and he's a pretty big deal. So if you can get these guys that are coming up to share your articles, then their friends share their articles and their friends share the articles. And that's what I'm saying about your local regional scene. If you get in with these guys, then all of their friends know who you are. And they're like, dude, this guy did an interview with this guy. Check him out. They're going to get to know you, man. It's all about who you know, as we said earlier.
It is, and yeah, that sharing is so important with the guys that are coming up, and yeah, big example is that guy Rung Rung. He has like one professional fight, and he just got signed by one championship, but he's hugely popular, man. I don't even know why. He's had one fight. Nobody really knows the talent that he has, but for some reason, people love him and they retweet him, they share him, they like him, they read his articles about him, and I think Nick's gonna be interviewing him in the coming week or so. So we'll
Nice.
I
see.
got him and Alan on Sunday at the same time.
Nice. And I have to say as well, like, you guys might not think, like, I say that Euros article, you know, or KSW articles get 8,000 views for one article. It's a lot different on a website than it is on a video. A video can get 8,000 views, no problem. Like, YouTube pushes videos, right? Like 8,000, 10,000 views on a video on YouTube is not next level, but 8,000 views on an article on an independent website, that means 8,000 different people have come to MMAsucka.com. MMAsucka.com is not YouTube.
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, YouTube.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
totally different animal, with YouTube, and that's why people are on YouTube all the time. They're not on Vimeo. Let me tell you that.
exactly.
If they were on Vimeo, I'd be on Vimeo, right? Like I'd be posting everything on Vimeo. But yeah, it's just going back to the question is it all depends on what you want to do, and Jeremy broke it down perfectly. It's like, don't do the same thing. And I wanted to ask Jeremy about something too. It's like, let's say I do an interview with a fighter and I cut that interview in half and I sell one part of it to your website.
That's completely fine. I don't have any. So when I say the same thing, I'm not saying don't write about. So say you're writing about Connor, or you're writing about John Jones, or you're writing about someone like this. You have a big interview. I'm not saying don't write about John Jones at my site and then John Jones at another site. I'm saying don't write the exact article on both sites.
But the thing is, like, let's say you interviewed a regional guy, or let's say you interviewed John Jones, and then I took half of that interview and I gave it to you, and then I took the same interview, but the other half of the interview I gave it to another website. But is there a conflict of interest right there?
I don't think there's a conflict of interest at all, because what you're doing is the two interviews, you would cut it in a way that the two interviews sold something completely different. So the first half of the interview might have been about, his coke habit. The second half of the interview might be about him going and fighting Israel Adesanya. I'd obviously want the coke part of it, but it'd get way more views. But either way, you're not selling the same thing to both websites. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no conflict of interest unless it's, say he was talking about Israel Adesanya, and you cut that in half, so both websites were getting stuff about Izzy. Doesn't make sense.
All right. That clears up a lot of stuff, even for myself, thinking about, like, how do you take stuff from this, something that you've done, and then kind of, other websites have come to me about an interview and then asked me to write about it, but then I did the interview for another website.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird right there. That's something kind of,
I mean, yeah, you did it for another website, but at the same time, you own your content. Do you know what I mean? Like, you are the man behind your content. So I personally, as a website owner, I have no issue with it. And I don't think a lot out there would.
All right. That sounds good. Now, what do we got next?
All right, let's go to Tristan. What's up, Tristan? One of our regular fans on the channel here, asking a question for Jeremy on the James Lynch comment. I understand his hustle, but sometimes I find it's not the highest quality. What do you think about quantity of content over quality? I love James Lynch. How could we bash James Lynch?
I'm actually personal friends with James Lynch. We go. He lives in the same area as I do. We go for breakfast. We hang out. We chat a lot. He's written for the site. He's done videos for the site. He's good at what he does. And as John said earlier, he's always trying to improve. Now, You say quality isn't always the highest. Now, obviously, my webcam sucks right now, and the quality of that is not very good. I do have a nice Panasonic GH4 downstairs, but that wouldn't let me do the trick here. I have to use my wife's computer because I forgot the one I was going to use at work. Now, my quality, I can't talk about it. Hopefully, the quality of what I'm speaking is great, but quality over quantity, I mean, it's tough to break that down because I don't know what you mean by quality. Do you mean the questions he's asking, what he's doing? Do you mean the quality of the video? Do you mean the quality of the sound? Because personally, I always think sound comes first over video. If I'm doing a video interview and the subject is not in 1080p, he's in 720 or whatever you do, but the sound is top notch, I'd watch that over a 4K video with completely crap audio. I think audio is the number one thing when it comes to content, because if the person can't hear what the person is talking about, then who cares about anything else? So I sort of need to know the breakdown of what you mean by quantity of content over quality. I know he puts out a ton of stuff. He didn't when he was working for his previous publication because, you know, I mean, they wanted all UFC, but he's back to doing what he does best, and that's talking to everyone he can. And I love watching everything James Lynch does. He puts it out there to the people. He does a Q&A, which people love listening to, and you can ask him any question in the world and he'll answer it. I saw last week his son even made an appearance on his show, which was awesome.
I was there.
Nice. But I don't think, I honestly think he's upped his game in terms of quality. He figured out how to use his mirrorless camera as his camera for his interviews. And I mean, like, yeah. So interview style. Okay, there. I see his question. You can read it, Nick, if you want.
Yeah. So I think Tristan, just clarifying here, he's a good dude, but sometimes I think his interview style is odd. The questions, responses he poses seem weird at times.
So what I'll say, as I said, I love everything James Lynch does. I will never dog the guy because I think he's one of the best in the business at what he does, and he's one of the best in the game when it comes to hustle. Now, he knows what he's doing when it comes to these interviews, because he will ask those guys similar questions every single time he talks to a different fighter. He's going to ask them what they're looking for in the fight. He's going to ask them who's going to be in their corner. He's going to ask them, you know, standard fight questions. And then he dives off, because then he creates a second video with that same interview. You know, he does the pros picks. He does like, what are the other ones? Like what people are playing video games. He talked about sex with fighters. So his big interview isn't about those things. Those are the side topics. His big interview with the guys is typically the same formulated answers or same formulated questions that he asks every single fighter. And you know what? That works for James because that's what he's formed as his niche. And to you, maybe it'll come off as odd with some of these guys. But again, the interview subject is sometimes odd. John, you guys know this, that you could interview a guy and ask him a question where you think you're going to get the best answer in the world. Yeah. And he tells you one freaking word.
Yeah.
Those are the worst. It's like pulling teeth. It's not always the interviewer that's the odd one. Sometimes it's the guy on the other side of the camera or the mic.
Yeah, you got to look at the body of work, right? And with James, his body of work is phenomenal, man. Like you just said, he has created a niche. And when you go to James, you understand what he brings to the table.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, and his interviews, of course, every interview is not going to be the best interview in the world. Yeah. You know, like if you go to watch my interviews, not all of them are good interviews. Probably most of them are not good interviews, right? In my eyes. So like, if you look at James's interviews, I can't watch every single interview James does. So I don't know every single thing that he's doing in the interviews. But when I do go look at some of the interviews that he does as research for my interviews, I think he kind of reveals some things that helps me a lot. You know what I mean? Because then I get to add on to my questions, you know what I mean? Like something that, you know, maybe he missed, or maybe something that he didn't delve into too much, right? But
or the guy gave him an answer that you found interesting, and you're like, damn, I'm gonna follow up on that.
Exactly. And he helps me a lot, you know what I mean? And he's and the thing about it is he does have quantity, but his quality, if you go and watch some of his videos, quality is insane. Like the flow that he has, the rapport that he has with some of the fighters, they're so comfortable with them, and that creates really good interviews. You know what I mean? Like if you've been interviewing a guy, or just the first time you're interviewing a fighter, it could be uncomfortable because they're not even used to doing interviews, and they don't even understand like the question because they're so nervous. Right? They're like,
exactly. And the coolest thing about that, like you said, the fighters are comfortable with him. And the coolest thing about that is we saw that a few months ago when he did media interviews post-fight during a UFC event. And one of the fighters came on screen and they saw him there asking a question. And they were like, "Hey, James, it's great to see you, man." Like, for guys to do that and react to you that way, that's like huge. That puts goosebumps on my arms even thinking about that happening to James.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, like for James, who is a guy that is also independent himself, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And him to get on like UFC countdowns, like them using his voice, and this happened a bunch of times because I've been watching UFC countdowns, and then James will come on, his voice will come on, and they'll use like sound bites from him. And they don't do that for a lot of people, man, especially someone that is independent. Usually it's for like BBC Sports or MMA Fighting or ESPN. But James gets on there, man, that shows you how good he is and how respected he is in the game.
And I'll say this as well, that as I said, the other side of the microphone is always triggering and always different, and can be awkward if someone answers differently than you expect them to, which in return you follow up with sort of an awkwardness. Do you know what I mean? Like I had an interview where I did in-cage interviews for an organization called 5-Star Fight League. Caleb Starnes fought for the organization and he knocked this guy out, and I asked him a question and he looked at me and he was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said that in the microphone. When I had the microphone up to his mouth, he's like, "What are you talking about? You didn't think I wanted to do that?" Like almost I was put like back. I was like, "Whoa." You know what I mean? Like, so the response that you get from a fighter or whoever you're interviewing can startle you in a way that will make your response completely different. And I usually have no problems talking to people. I could shoot the shit for hours.
Me, I'm antisocial, but I interview fighters, so it's kind of a weird thing. With interviewing too, is that there's different styles of interviewing, and we talked about that earlier, right? You got Ariel's style of interviewing, you got Brett Okamoto's style of interviewing, you know what I mean? You got Mike Heck's style of interviewing, and there's some similarities there, but they're all different, you know, and you got Jeremy's style of interviewing and mine. You know, I might ask you something totally different from what anybody else would ask you, you know, and it all depends on what you like too, you know, because everybody has an opinion and everybody has their style that they enjoy. And and if you don't like it, it's just your opinion, you know what I mean? If you feel like the quality is not that great, it's just your opinion, you know, and I respect everybody's opinion. And I've gotten hate for stuff, you know what I mean? And people have praised me for stuff, but I don't let that affect me. Even the praise, you know what I mean? It's like, who am I? You know what I mean? I'm doing it, but I just been doing it longer than everybody else. Exactly. It's a survival game. It's Survivor MMA edition, right? That's what it is.
Your torch is still lit.
Yeah, exactly. It's all. I wish I was on Fire Island with my torch, but
yeah, exactly.
You know, what can you do, right? So we got anything else we can move on to?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say I'm a huge fan of James Lynch as well, and I got nothing bad to say about the guy. Tristan, I would say you're in the naughty books, but he also said, by the way, SCMP MMA has slowly become his favorite, so he's back in our good graces, Tristan. Okay, other questions. Let me have a little look here. Chris Edwards Bailey, our guy Chris, he's the man. He does the he's gonna be doing a preview with me later for UFC. So come check that out, everyone who's watching here. We got his question. What Asian organization does the best numbers? One, Ryzen, Road, Kunlun. Yeah, I can give my answer. Let's go to Jeremy first.
Well, over at our site, we do cover one a lot. So I find that because we cover it consistently, it gives us good views because people know that they can find stuff from us. We're actually an affiliate, like a partner of One Championship. So we have their US media guy. He writes up articles for us once or twice a week, and they put them out on our site. They're not press releases. They're actually physically written by this guy to put out on our site. But I will say Ryzen does great numbers. It sucks that those events are so few and far between.
Yeah, I don't really get any numbers for anything other than one in terms of Asian organizations. But John, I'd say we don't really write too much, do we, about Ryzen or Rode or anything else.
Well, look at that. You got one gloves in the background, man. Come on.
Well, they're the only ones who give me free shit. No, PFL tried to send me a swag bag from Vegas, but it got lost because my address is quite complicated. So I'm trying to get some. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to get some UFC in the background, but you got to actually pay for UFC stuff.
Yeah.
So
I will say I did actually. The coolest thing about writing or owning my website and writing in the game and all that stuff is the connections you make along the way. It's great to know you, John, and nice to meet you and all this stuff. And the coolest thing is, like, I got to write for one's website for like 2.5 years. Bear Fraser, he was the managing editor over there. He brought me aboard. I wrote previews. I wrote interviews for the website. Huge conflict of interest, according to, MMA Journalist Association. I could never apply for that. God forbid I write for a promotions website. Whereas half these guys that are in the MMA journalism organization wrote for UFC.com. But that was a cool experience. I got to interview a lot of the guys that I didn't necessarily think I would chat with. And those are usually the best interviews, are the guys that you don't reach out to initially. I had some great chats with Amir Khan. That guy is like one of my favorite dudes in the entire world. So that's the cool thing about getting into the game, is the people you meet. And like, I didn't even know Bear. I hosted the podcast for a completely change of subject, but I hosted the podcast for the UG. I was the MMA Underground podcast host with Kirik and Chris Palmquist. And
love Kirik.
Dude, that website is the complete OG of all MMA websites. And they reached out to me. They emailed me and said, "Hey, Jeremy, do you want to host our podcast?" And I was like, where the heck did you get my information from? Like, I know I have it on the website, obviously, but they reached out to me to host their podcast, and that was super cool as well. So it's who you meet, and people will find you when your name is out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in the comments, Tristan was, talking about, the forum that we have right now and the type of live chat that we're doing. Man, you ask anything you want, man. We're going to get to the questions. There's nothing that's like censored, right? Unless you're trying to just bash people, then there's a difference, right? There's a difference between asking an honest question, something that you're curious about, and just bashing somebody. So Tristan, ask away, man. Don't feel like someone's offended or anything like that. Don't worry about it.
I'm sure James won't be mad.
Nah,
sure
James tripping, right?
Probably enjoys criticism.
Exactly. As you said, he's been featured on UFC countdowns, man. He's not going to get mad at someone saying the quality isn't the best, because he believes in himself, and that's what you need, right? Is to believe in what you do.
Yeah. So don't worry about it, Tristan. It's all good. Now with what were we talking about, man? Like, what were we?
Asian promotions and what's covered. What numbers?
Okay. So for me, like, I don't really know the numbers of articles, right? Because I'll cover Road. I'll write articles on Road for AsiaMMA.com, and I'll write articles on like Japanese promotions, and from time to time I'll write articles for Asian fighters in the UFC. But I don't know the numbers on that, so I don't know what kind of clicks they're getting. But one thing that I know is when I put up videos, I know the numbers of viewers that see the video on YouTube, right? So when I see like the numbers, it all depends on who the fighter is and like where they are in their career, and if there's something interesting about their interview, right? It's not like one particular promotion is getting way more numbers than another promotion. It all depends on the fighter. So like last December, I did like, I don't even know, like 12 interviews for the New Year's Eve card, and one of the highest viewed interviews was I is probably someone that's not very known, but for some reason she was a topic of interest, and she even lost her fight, but people wanted to know, who she was. And I think she hasn't done many interviews either, so people are interested in her, and that's it. So I don't know what's the method to the madness of
you never know with views, man. Like, exactly. The oddest article that's written in the world could get thousands and thousands of views. It's what people want to read. And you know what, with our site being pretty high up in Google News standing, because we've done fantastic with our SEO and only getting better, there's such niche articles. You never know what someone's going to type into Google, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you never know what you're going to type into Google, right? Yeah, it's just, it's sometimes things hit, and sometimes they don't. You think like, oh, I just did this piece, I just did this interview, it's gonna hit hard, man. There's gonna be like a gang of views on it, and then dud, right? And then something that you did, and then you go to you just upload it and you don't think about it, and then next thing you know, it's like everywhere. Everybody's like sourcing it and all of that, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like I just recently did no, actually I was talking back and forth messaging with Dan Hooker, right? And then there's all these rumors going around like, oh, he's gonna fight Michael Chandler, but nothing's official. So I just messaging him back and forth with him, and then once it got official, I was like, all right, let's set up the interview. And I almost took the interview somewhere else, to be honest with you. I almost took the interview to somebody else, but Nick was like, hey, let's do the interview here on SCMP. And I was like, all right, I'd rather do it on here. And then I didn't even think it was gonna like get that type of viewership, to be honest with you. And it's like past 80,000 views on YouTube, right? So that's pretty decent for an interview, right? So for us,
our best interview ever, I think.
Wow, amazing, man.
Yeah, it's by far our biggest interview on YouTube for the fighter. I mean, I think Onglar gets like big numbers from all his Myanmar heavies back home. They all worship that guy. But for UFC, I think that's by far the biggest we've had.
Yeah, so that wasn't something that I did and I was done with it. And I'm just like, oh, it's it's gonna be massive. I didn't think that. I was just thinking like, okay, it's a Dan Hooker interview. Dan Hooker's always a good interview, no matter what. It's nothing different from what we did before. It's just different topics, and it just became bigger than I expected. So, I'm glad
YouTube kind of grabbed onto the algorithm somehow. I'm not sure. I think it was time and place. You were right time, right place. You were the first one to have him one-on-one. You were one of the only people. I think you and James got him, right? And when you're not competing with 10 other outlets, like today's all the videos from the media day last night, not sure I'll even put them up because like 100 other outlets going to have the same.
That's
videos.
Exactly what I said earlier, Nick. I said the exact same thing. I said like 9 years ago, I was like, I have to go to every MMA event, man. I have to cover them. And then I was like, I'm in the media room with 20 other guys, if not more, and they're all asking questions. I'm going to have the same video as all these guys. Why do I have to leave my house? I can cover who I want, when I want, from my own house, and I don't have to spend money getting to events. You know what I mean? Like, again, find your niche. You don't need to put out the same thing as every other website out there.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a niche going with the One Championship events. It's basically just me and this guy Leon who does Asian Persuasion MMA. We have him on the podcast sometime, but we were the only two maybe Western websites, like Western English speaking guys covering them, and everyone else there's local media. But yeah, we had the whole market to ourselves basically. I think he was a bit pissed off when I turned up because he used to have it entirely to himself. But, sometimes we get incredible stuff, but I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah, just it you never know. It just depends. You know what I mean? Just depends.
It's a different story if it's in your backyard too, right? Yeah, like I'll go to anything that's here in Vancouver. When I can cross the border again, I'll go to stuff in Washington or Portland, a 6-hour drive down the highway. But I mean, I'm not going to fly to go to events when I don't need to.
I go to almost every MMA show and sometimes kickboxing shows in Korea because Korea is such a small country. Like the farthest you'll drive is 4 or 5, 6 hours. So pretty much you could go almost everywhere. If I can make it, I'm gonna go. And usually the local promotions, they're accommodating, man. It's surprising. Like once you show up or they know you're coming, they really take care of you. They really try to like make everything comfortable for you. It's not like you're just like an afterthought for them. It's just like, oh, you're here. You really want to cover us. You really want to like write something about the show. And it's just like, it's cool to see that though. You know what I mean? Like those local promotions, they remember you. They don't forget who you are. So yeah, I think that's advice to a lot of you guys that are coming up here watching this. Go to local shows, man, and just like know people and be like, hey, this is me. You know, this is my social media. Nowadays, there's no like cards anymore. You can just give them your social media and they can follow each other and they like know who you are. Like
that's the thing. All these guys, all these big fighters came from somewhere. I mean, there are the odd guys that fight at 0-0 for one championship because they're marketable. Like, look at Angela Lee's younger sister. She's going to come into the game and sign by one championship already. But most of these guys come from the regional scene and then make it to the UFC or Bellator or PFL or another major organization. So if you get in on them on the ground level in your local scene where you live, huge.
Yeah, you got it. Now, there's a couple topics. We're gonna get to some questions, but there's a couple topics. We usually go about an hour and a half, so we only have about 25 minutes left. But the first thing is, of course, Jeremy is Canadian. You know, we got love for all the Canadians. I think we've had almost every single Canadian journalist on here, and guy that is a part of the media or somebody that I know who particularly, right, I have a direct connection to. And it's GSP versus Khabib. You know, I wanted to get into this because this is the fight that everybody's chasing. How is Khabib? What is Khabib gonna do if he returns? There's only one fight. It's GSP, but then you gotta have two people to fight each other to have a fight, right? And it's like GSP is drinking non-alcoholic Budweisers on his couch, right? So, Jeremy, tell me what is going on, man? Why are people chasing?
Man, I don't know. I think people latch on to GSP's balls so hard that I don't know. They just want him to come back. I don't get it. The guy rode off on his shield, man. He beat the shit out of Michael Bisping. Like, and I'm a huge Bisping fan. Don't get me wrong. Like, giant. When Michael Bisping knocked out Luke Rockhold, I literally jumped out of my seat. My daughter thought I was crazy. She's like, why are you jumping? I'm like, dude, this guy wasn't supposed to win. But GSP, on the other hand, he's sacred here in Canada. No one could ever do what he did. No one could ever become what he has become. Everyone thought Rory McDonald was the next GSP. That sort of didn't play out the way it should have. I don't know what it is, but they love this guy. He's like sacrilegious, man. It's crazy. And especially in Quebec, like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of his blonde hair either. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, shave his head again, dude. Come on. You're GSP, walk out with the shave head. And I don't think this fight with Khabib makes any sense at all. He walked out on his shield. Khabib coming back. Like, what if GSP beats him? 20-1. 20-1. Khabib, you should have just stayed retired, dude. You know what I mean? Your mom wants you to retire. Stay retired. The fight doesn't need to happen. If he wants to come back and fight for the belt, like, I mean, whatever. Maybe Connor or Dustin, whoever wins that fight, can fight Khabib for the belt. Makes sense. Like, Connor was completely out to lunch in that first Khabib fight. I don't think anything will go any differently in a second fight because Khabib is just Khabib. But I don't know, man. Those two guys are the two guys to make this fight happen. I can't see GSP making anywhere close to 155 pounds. It would have to be a catchweight fight. And Khabib is not a giant at 155 pounds. He's bigger than some of the guys that he fights, but he's nowhere near 170. They could fight at 160. GSP will still be the bigger guy. So it doesn't make sense. It's not a win-win for either one of these guys. GSP wins. He beat a guy who's a lightweight. And Khabib wins, and he beat a guy who hasn't fought for how many years? You know what I mean? Like, you're taking away it. It's an asterisk of a fight as it is. Makes no sense to me. I don't want to see GSP come back.
GSP is GSP, man.
The big fight to make right now,
what do you think?
Is John Jones versus Izzy.
Yeah,
that's the fight to make. Like, this is all back in the day. The fight to make was GSP versus Anderson Silva. That was the fight everyone wanted. I don't understand Khabib GSP, to be honest with you. It's because they're both wrestlers and they're both similar fighters. That's the only reason people want to see it. It's like it said, a hype fight, but it makes no sense from either party.
And I don't see Khabib like going up in weight to fight GSP. I feel Khabib is a smart enough guy to where he wants to fight at a weight where he has the advantages, and which is 155, right? And it shows because he's unbeaten at that weight. With GSP, I think GSP knows that too. And GSP is just until you meet my criteria, I'm on my couch drinking Budweiser.
Exactly. And GSP didn't have to cut any weight for that fight against Michael Bisping. which means he walks around at maybe 187, 186, like around that 185 weight. He cut maybe 2-3 pounds. Who knows? But to cut to 170 or 160 at he's not super old, but he's old for a fighter. It is insane at this point. Like you say, stay on your couch, continue to do your gymnastics and your weird plyometric stuff that you do, run in the snow, drink the Budweiser, dye your hair blonde, maybe dye it purple, but don't come back to the octagon.
Yeah. Well, Khabib, I don't think there's any fights for him, to be honest with you.
No, he destroys everyone.
Yeah. But the thing is, I would like to see him fight everyone, though. I feel like people, like when you look at the runs that the legends have gone on, right? GSPs, the John Jones, the Anderson Silvas, right? We've watched that in real time happen. And it's just incredible to see them fight contender after contender and beat them all one after another, right? And even though they might have the advantage in some of the fights, but you never know going into a fight like what exactly.
I was scared every single time GSP entered the cage. I will tell you, man, every single time. There wasn't a time where I didn't get scared. UFC 100 walked into the octagon. Who'd he fight? Thiago Alves, I think. Man, I was scared like crazy. Because of the Matt Serra fight, though, right? Mm-hmm. You knew something could happen to him.
Yeah, and
I was scared every time.
And I have the opinion of Khabib. He's a great fighter, but he needs to defend that title like a few more times to kind of get that status of the real legend status, like a Anderson, like a GSP, right? Those are legends, man. Like they defended title after title after title after title of everybody. They didn't pick anybody. They fought who they wanted to. They fought who was the next guy, right? And did it, and was not afraid to do it, right? So I think
let me ask you guys this then, because you said GSP, you said Anderson Silva, you didn't mention John Jones. Now I want to ask this because this is the question that gets brought up all the time about greatest of all time. No, I'm not the interviewer here, I'm the guest, but I want to ask you this because I feel like John Jones is arguably one of the greatest of all time. I don't think his outside the cage antics should play into what happened inside the cage.
Oh, no, definitely not. I put John Jones in there with the GSPs and
TJ's my all-time number one.
Yeah, I think DJ, I forgot DJ too. DJ, GSPs, Andersons, the John Joneses. I don't think you could put Khabib with them, just off like what they accomplished in the title runs that they went on. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Khabib needs to beat a couple more contenders, even if you think that he washes all of them. He just needs to prove it to us so we could put them in the same bracket, right? Of course, Khabib will probably go down as one of the greatest of all time, but as like that legend, like that like just I don't know, it's just another bracket that
I think Izzy's gonna step above him with another few title defenses.
I think so too, man, because Izzy's that's his mentality. Like,
and he's also beaten more who's than Khabib did.
Exactly. And who, if you look at Khabib's title run, right? He beat who? McGregor, he beat Gaethje, he beat Poirier. I think those are the three biggest names, right?
Yeah,
he's
for
beaten,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So he needs to beat the other guys. He needs to, if Chandler can come up, beat Chandler. If Hooker can come up, beat Hooker. You know what I mean? If I'm not really interested in seeing the rematches with McGregor and Poirier, right?
Well, I don't see it going any different. I think Khabib knows what they're gonna do, and he has the same mentality going into every fight. That's the difference between him and guys like John Jones and Anderson. Anderson was always unpredictable. John Jones tried to do what the other guy did to him. You know what I mean? Like John Jones used the other guy's strengths against him. But guys like GSP, you knew what he was gonna do. He was going to wait until the perfect time, shoot in, and then beat the crap out of you on the ground. Khabib does the exact same thing. He will grind you up against the cage until you wilt, take you down to the ground, and either tap you out or beat the crap out of you with his fists or elbows. There's no difference. None of these guys are going to be able to do anything to him because they know his game plan, yet he has perfected it so much that he's going to be able to do it to you.
Yeah, but the thing is, we know that. But I'm interested to see if he could continue to do that because there's so many variables going into a fight.
True.
You know,
Everyone thought Tony Ferguson was going to kick the crap out of him, right? Because he's good off of his back. But it's hard to be good off your back when you have no space.
Exactly. And you know, you got Oliveira coming up. You never know. Styles make fights, and the variables are there.
What about a guy like Usman? He's a big guy. He could, you never know. Maybe he could cut down.
Usman, I don't know about that. He is a big guy, right? And then there's another guy
that's a cool fight,
he doesn't get enough credit either, man. I feel like that guy could go on, like, he could be like a GSP if he actually fought enough. You know what I mean?
I thought he was boring a few years ago. I think he's pretty damn good now.
I think that with Usman, he's facing the worst matchup in that division in his next fight.
Yes.
And it's a guy that knows everything that he can do. And he's trained with them. He's sparred with them. And I've spoken with Gilbert Burns many times about Usman. And it's just that I always go back to the part where when they announced this fight, who left Sanford MMA? Not the champion.
No.
Or not the challenger. The champion left, right?
Exactly.
So what can you read into that? You know, I always point to that, but I'm just going off another tangent. But you know, like
this whole interview we have, man, come on.
Yeah. And people disagree with me about the whole Khabib thing. Like, he's cleared out the division. I don't think so, man. How can you clear out the division in 3 fights?
Exactly. There's a top 10 for a reason, right? Top 15.
Exactly. So I wish he would do that, but most likely he won't. You know, because there's many different factors in UFC and how they put fights together, especially title fights. And the fight that they want to make is the McGregor rematch. And I'm probably thinking that that's probably not going to happen. But if it does, if I was a betting man, I'd bet that fight is over earlier than the last fight.
Yeah.
If I was a betting man, you know what I mean? Like, if McGregor comes out here against Poirier and shows us that he can do it better than last time, then I could give McGregor some props. But I still don't feel like, oh, you go in there against Khabib and do anything different. I feel like Khabib is just going to go in there and steamroll him. But I'm very interested in Oliveira and just some of the other stylistic,
especially the way Charles looked in his last fight, man.
Exactly.
Good Lord.
Right? And it's not like Khabib carries knockout power. You know what I mean?
No.
It's on the ground, right? Mostly. So
he did block Conor once in that last fight, though, right?
Yeah, he
did. He hit him with a solid jab, I think.
You gotta give him credit for that, though. Yeah, he did. He smashed him, right? That was a nice little and he did it with like the takedown attempt, like with that, and then just got Conor like a little comfortable with trying to defend the takedown and threw that overhand right. That was nice. That was beautiful. One more thing, you know, like before we go, do we have any questions?
There's a couple I can get to. Let me know if you want any.
All right, just go. Let's see what we got. Questions.
Okay. There's one from H Boss a bit higher up, but because I'm going backwards scrolling through, we'll just start low down. Tristan was asking, would you guys like to see Khabib v Charles Oliveira?
I think it's an interesting matchup. I've been very, very impressed with Charles Oliveira as of late. I mean, coming up, he was always a bit of a roller coaster ride, and over the course of his last few fights, he's looked insane. I mean, what he did in his last bout was nothing less than amazing. Like, there wouldn't be surprised if that arm was completely shattered with the way he extended it. But I mean, on the ground, on the feet, the way he transitioned on the ground, like Tony Ferguson is a guy that is amazing off his back. He's a 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy who has rubber for legs and arms. And the way he was able to manipulate him on the ground and move to mount and side control and take the back, and like, it was so impressive. I understand Charles Oliveira is a black belt, but there's a difference between black belts in different aspects of jiu-jitsu. Like, I train jiu-jitsu myself, not to toot my own horn, I'm a brown belt, but but the way Charles Oliveira controlled this 10th planet guy on the ground was second to none. And if he's able to somehow get Khabib on his back, which we've never seen before, it would be an interesting ball game in there.
Yeah, I agree. That's an interesting matchup stylistically, and what kind of compromising positions can Charles Oliveira put Khabib in, if he's able to put him in any kind of compromising positions. And that's why I want to see the fight. I want to see it because of those reasons. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a fan of the sport, you just don't, write off a fighter, especially a guy that's in the top 10, top 5, and what is he on, like a 90 fight winning streak? If you go on a 10 fight winning streak in the lightweight division, that's like a 90 fight winning streak, right?
Dude, the lightweight division is and almost always has been the deepest division in the UFC.
Definitely. Well, before we shut it down, we got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to get into there's a lot of talk recently with with CTE, and then you got Tito out there. Somehow he got voted into office in Huntington Beach. I have no idea how that happened, but it's happening, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are regretting this now. And then you got the Steve Fisher story. I think is it Steve Fisher? Yeah, Steve Fisher story that just came out recently. And then you got
Spencer Fisher.
Yeah, Spencer Fisher, and then you got other fighters kind of showing weird behavior, right? And a lot of people probably think that is an effect of CTE. You know what I mean? Like, what is your thoughts on this, man? Because other sports, like let's say rugby, let's say football, American football, hockey, right? They've been around for a long time, and they've also or athletes in that sport have shown weird behavior too. And then they've killed people, they've killed themselves. And do you think it's just something that's going to happen in this sport eventually? Because this sport is not very old, and now we're going to start seeing some bad effects of it.
I think the problem with the way CTE has been handled in the larger professional sports, like you mentioned, the NFL and such, is that we didn't know about it, and the general public didn't know about it. Even medical professionals didn't know about it until the person had passed and they had done an autopsy and like studied the brain of the injured person. Like, we didn't know that half these guys had any trauma. Now with the NFL, it's fantastic. They have, the concussion protocol tents where if a guy gets hit in the head, they have to go over there to get checked. MMA is a different story, right? They're getting constantly hit in the head. And a lot of people talk about boxing and the CTE and the brain trauma that these guys have. Like, we saw Muhammad Ali have difficulties in his later life, obviously. But MMA is that much more different. When a fighter gets knocked down in boxing, they get a standing 8 count. They get to stand back up. They're not getting punched on the ground. There's no ground and pound. MMA arguably has way more head trauma than boxing or football or anything like that. We haven't seen a ton in terms of announced CTE from the sport. I mean, we've seen obviously guys like War Machine, like we spoke about before the show. He went on a bit of a rampage. We've seen even guys that are still fighting. I don't know if we want to get into this at all, but like Max Holloway a few fights ago, pre-fight interview didn't even sound like him. I mean, he's come a long way since that fight. I think that was only 2 fights ago or something that you couldn't even understand some of the words that were coming out of his mouth. Now, this fight, pre-fight, he sounded fantastic. Now, Max Holloway's a guy that we've had, I've chat with him a ton of times. I chat with him before his first fight in the UFC. He was like the youngest fighter in the UFC at the time. We go way back, but that's something that I would keep an eye on, especially for these guys like him, Justin Gaethje, even Dan Hooker, these guys that like to get into brawls. I mean, we got to look out for these guys' health, and Dana has to be a guy. Now, we're speaking UFC fighters right now, but there's other organizations out there. Dana has to be the guy to pull the plug on these older fighters. Vanderlei Silva, sometimes you can barely understand what that guy's saying as well. Dana had to pull the plug on that guy. We don't need to see these guys get the plug pulled from the UFC and taken over to Bellator to fight another degenerate over there and pound each other's heads in. Like, look at what we saw with Kimbo Slice and Dada 5000. Yeah. Rest in peace, Kimbo, because that guy was a true legend of the sport. But I mean, those guys like Dada 5000 died in the ring, man. He literally had to get brought back to life because I don't know if it was CTE. It likely wasn't. But these guys are punching each other so much in the head. Yes, it's called the hurt business for a reason. But there's a time to know when to call it quits. And the fighters don't know when it is. So either their management, their coaches, or Dana White and the presidents of the other organizations need to pull the plug on them.
I'm not a person that says that a fighter should retire because that's their choice and it's the responsibility of the people around them. And I'm not gonna be yelling at the top of my lungs for that, but it is clear that CT is affecting some fighters, and I think it starts with not it. Of course, they're you know having there's damage in the fights, right? But I think most of the damage, and probably just like in boxing, is done in the training room.
For
And
sure.
these guys are going to war in the training room, and I feel like the fighters, the coaches, the managers, they need to start being responsible of how these fighters are getting prepared for their fights. Do they even need to spar that much? There's guys in the highest level that did camps without even sparring and won titles. Let me give you an example. Robbie Lawler, right? Robbie Lawler went all the way to the UFC title, and he was talking about he didn't spar. He would train and he would go, he would go hard, but it wouldn't
John did the same thing though, right? John was out on benders and then came into the cage and beat the crap out of guys. You know what I mean? Like he didn't care. But that's John. Right? John's a specimen. He is something else. Yes, Dada had a heart attack in the hospital, but he was stretchered out from the ring, I believe, or the cage, taken out on a stretcher.
Max Holloway too. Like you gave a perfect example of him before it was before he was going to step in for Khabib, right?
Yeah.
Khabib. And they pulled him, and luckily they caught that, right? And shout out to Michael Bisping. I think he's the one who kind of pointed that out.
He did. He's like, "Is there something wrong with you?" Like he actually literally said it to Max, I think.
Yeah, during the live interview. Yeah. And they pulled him, and I'm glad. But then I feel like that camp, they learned from that. And if you notice that in his last 2 camps, and probably at the camp before that, he didn't do any sparring.
No, yeah.
He didn't do any, and he looked like the same Max
Another
Holloway.
Hawaiian. Look at BJ Penn, man. That guy, I mean, he fought into late in his career, and who knows what's happening with him now, but he's a guy as well, getting into fights outside the cage, getting into fights at the, in Hawaii. But like he's gotten beaten up a lot. And yeah, again, the guy says it's the hurt business. I saw a question over there. I don't know if I can read this or not, but something about, should we put an age limit? I don't agree with the age limit because we've seen guys like Randy Couture come into the cage at like late 30s and become a champion. I don't believe in an age limit. I believe in the fighter and the camp knowing when their guy has taken too much damage. Now, John, you say you don't believe in a fighter retiring because that's what they want to do. I'm not preaching that the fighter should necessarily retire because they don't want to, but these guys have to know their limits. And because their head is so messed up from CTE, they might not know those limits, man. So someone else has to say, it's like throwing in the white towel, right? It's like throwing in the towel from the corner. The coach has seen that their fighter has taken enough damage, and they've thrown in the towel to say, stop the fight. Well, some of these fighters need that fight stopped before they even enter the cage.
And what I'm saying is that, of course, they need that guidance, that coach, the manager, their family, right? But me personally, I'm not gonna go out there and say,
no, not me. Exactly. No, yeah, I would never say that, and I would never ask a fighter either. Yeah. How long do you want to continue fighting? Like every fighter wants to fight forever, man. There's some guys that will say, hey, I only want to fight until I'm 40, but 90% of these guys are fighters at heart, and they're fighters in the cage for a reason, because they love fighting. I did see a GSP interview where he's like, I actually hate fighting. But come on, man. You loved getting in there. You loved getting in the cage. These guys love fighting.
And that's the perfect way to end it, man. They love to fight. And yeah, man, before we shut it down, thank you everybody for joining us in the chat. We really appreciate you guys getting involved and giving your opinions and asking questions. It's all love. Make sure to subscribe to the page, like it, go over to MMA Sucka's YouTube page, subscribe, watch their videos. They're going to be producing, like Jeremy said, they're going to start producing more content over there. Jeremy, just let us know, like, what is the plans for the website this year? What is something new we can expect out of you guys, or and where we can find you guys?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me on, man. Like as I said, I truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate you pushing the website whenever people question, how do I get started? Where should I get started? Because we're always that outlet. As you said, we're like the university for MMA media outlets. MMASucka.com. You can hit me up if you're interested at Jeremy Brand 604 on Twitter, on Instagram at Jeremy_604. MMA Sucka on Twitter is at MMA Sucka, SUCKA. You know, I loved Mr. T when I got this thing started, so that's how the name came about. People always question it. Thought about changing it at times, but I even had Dana White laugh at it once when I asked a question at the post-fight press conference. But it is what it is, guys. It's in there for the long haul. We've been in the game for over 11 years, and the name is staying. So on Instagram, we're at MMA_Sucka, because the other one got someone, you know, said that we posted a picture and they got rid of it. But follow us on Facebook as well. And the plan for the website is just upward growth, man. We hit a peak, and we don't want to drop into that valley. We hit the peak in December, and we want to keep climbing through 2021. We want to bring on eager writers. We got your boy Kenny Lee, who's in the chat, writing some wicked content. We're bringing interviews. As I said, I'm going to try to bring a podcast back, maybe not just one. We might have a number of podcasts on the website. We want to have a bit of a niche for everything, asking fighters questions outside the realm of the fight game. Get to know them as people, what they like to do in their personal life. That kind of stuff is one of the side of things that I'd like to see from these fighters, not necessarily in cage antics. So we want to bring you guys stuff that you might not see at other websites. But so check out MMASucka.com. You may like it. You may hate it. As I said, I don't give a shit if you don't like it, because I do.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Jeremy. And we'll have you back on, you know, in the future. Again, it was a fun chat, just delving into so many different aspects of just MMA media and, you know, just the game in general. And yeah, everybody, next week we're not going to have a show. You know why? Because the UFC is going to have 3 shows in 1 week, and one of the shows is going to be at the same time as this live chat. So I'm just going to skip the week. The week after, I'm going to have a coach on from Team Elevation. I'm not going to say the name. It's a surprise. So if you want to check in on Team Elevation and what they're doing out there, come back next